And right now, tens of thousands of migrant children are being held in concentration camps at the border. Yes, they are concentration camps, and of course, I'm going to show you why. Now, recently, a Trump official had argued that the government is not required in these camps to provide basic sanitary items to these migrant children. That would include soap, toothbrushes, or beds. Now, this is according to a story in Law and Crime. It said lawyers for the Trump administration had asked the U.S. Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit, to overturn a district court's order requiring the government to provide detainees with hygiene items such as soap and toothbrushes in order to comply with the safe and sanitary conditions requirement set forth in the 1997 Flores settlement. Now, let me give you what the Flores settlement states. The government shall hold minors in facilities that are safe and sanitary and that are consistent with the INS's concern for particular vulnerability of minors. Facilities will provide access to toilets and sinks, drinking water, and food as appropriate, medical assistance if the minor is in need of emergency services, adequate temperature control and ventilation, adequate supervision to protect minors from others, and contact with family members who were arrested with the minor. So that is the Flores settlement. That's what it says. However, you can notice in that statement that there were certain things that were not enumerated, which included hygiene items like beds, toothbrushes, and soap. So now Justice Department Attorney Sarah Fabian asserted that because the language in the Flores did not list soap, toothbrushes, or beds, the administration is not legally obligated to provide them and therefore would not. Now, I want to show you the response to some of these judges from the Ninth Circuit responding to this, because it's amazing. Take a look.
Right? You can't be safe and sanitary or safe as a human being if you can't sleep.
Well,
and you said in your briefs it doesn't say anything about sleeping, so therefore there's nothing in here about being able to sleep.
I think the concern there is, Your Honor, the court finding that sleep, for example, is relevant to a finding of no safe and sanitary conditions is one thing, but the ultimate conclusion is safe and sanitary is a singular category in the agreement, and it was one has to assume left that way and not enumerated by the parties because either the parties couldn't reach agreement on how to enumerate that, or that it was left to the agencies to determine.
Or it was relatively obvious, and it's at least obvious enough so that if you're putting people into a crowded room to sleep on a concrete floor with an aluminum foil blanket on top of them, that doesn't comply with the agreement.
All right. So that was Judge William Fletcher, who's like, are you kidding me? Do they literally have to spell out soap? No, look, it's obvious. All that stuff, if you cannot sleep because you're sleeping on a hard concrete floor instead of some sort of bedding with barely any blanket, an aluminum foil blanket, how is that safe and sanitary if you don't have soap? It's ridiculous, right? And besides, he also said, it's not like special soap. It's not fancy soap. No, it's just part of being safe and sanitary for these children. Now, of course, I'm glad that they did not find her arguments persuasive, but they continue, of course, or she continues to make that argument that, look, it's not in there, and why should we have to cover that? Which led to more responses by the justices, and I love this because this is a 3-panel judge in the Ninth Circuit Court, and they are just eviscerating this argument. Take a look.
But are you arguing seriously that you do not read the agreement as requiring you to do something other than what I've just described? Cold all night long, lights on all night long, sleep on the concrete, and you get an aluminum foil blanket? Are you saying that that's okay under the agreement?
And too crowded to lie down, which they also said.
I find that inconceivable that the government would say that that is safe and sanitary.
I think what I'm arguing, Your Honor, is that I don't believe that the district court made the finding in the way that Your Honor just detailed it.
Everything I just said comes right out of the district court order.
I think our concern is that the district court really looked at a condition, and again, as I said, I think sleep is clearly at the sort of one end of her findings. I think we also look at...
Which is your strongest argument, then?
Well, I mean, I think what I would go to is when you start enumerating, for example, specific hygiene items, and the way that was done is that the court sort of enumerated these and say these fall under the rubric, these fall in the category of what could be required.
Again, it wasn't perfume soap, it was soap. It wasn't, high-class milled soap, it was soap. And that sounds to that's part of safe and sanitary.
Again, I love these arguments, right? So you had Judge Marsha Burnson also saying, you're really gonna tell us that not being able to sleep is a question of safe and sanitary conditions? Like you're gonna sit there and tell us that. And then the other one is Judge Wallace Tashima. Look, so the issue of immigrant detention, and by the way, I love these justices. The Ninth Circuit is amazing because they're actually standing up for human rights. And it's and the other part of this is that you have an administration that is so against just offering people the basics. If you're going to house all these children, which the government has decided, yes, well, that's exactly what we're going to do, then you have to make sure that you have the resources to hold them in safe and sanitary conditions as per the freaking law. But as we've seen, they don't. And there is a reason for this, right? But first, before I get into the reasoning, let me give you some of the examples of the conditions that these migrant children are being held in. There are two places that have been documented so far that have been nicknamed the freezer and the dog pound. The human dog pound. That's what it's called. And it's been documented as being comprised of cages outside in the dirt, no protection from the elements, no running water, no covers, no tarp, no care from CBP officials. And it basically, since it's not covered, it gets cold at night. And it's deathly hot during the day, since it is in Arizona, Texas, etc. Right? Toddlers in the dog pound who are eating solid food or had been eating solid food are only given infant formula, and so mothers, of course, who are also incredibly weak from making that journey, are trying to breastfeed so that their children actually have some sort of food. That's the dog pound. Then they're moved from the dog pound to the freezer. Now, the freezer is an enclosed area inside. It's kept at 55 degrees, so it's pretty cold. The floor of the freezer is made of dirt or very rough concrete. There are no beds. There are cages. And, of course, they herd these people into these areas that are so packed that people have to stand on toilets to be able to breathe. These accounts were confirmed by the Human Rights Watch. This is what's happening at the border. This is what's happening in our government. And you know what the reason is? It's not an oversight. It's not an accident that this is happening. No. The cruelty is the point. These officials, a lot of these officials, are deeply racist people that have hired on to become Border Patrol, right? And I'm not saying that lightly. People in ICE, right? They signed up for this because they like punishing immigrants. They don't believe that they're people. You cannot put somebody in the dog pound in these conditions and consider them human beings. You don't do that to human beings. The cruelty is the point. And here's the Trump administration saying, we want more cruelty. We don't believe that we should have to give them soap or beds. We just shouldn't have to do it. Why? Because it's basic human rights. That's why. Safe and sanitary conditions. These are children. God damn it, we should know better. We should know better, and we should do better. Because right now, what we're doing is just inhumane. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.